NFL, Dillon Brooks returns to the Grizzlies, but the most monumental return of all. I myself, Shawn Coleman, am back with Damichael Cole on the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. It's good to be back. Damichael, how are you, sir? All kidding aside, my return's nothing. But Damichael, all joking aside, it's good to see you, sir. Welcome to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. How are you, Damichael?
Shawn, it's good to be here with you, man. It was great, hosting last week and breaking the ice, as they would say. And now we got my co-host back, Shawn, and we're gonna have some fun, man. Let's do it.
Going to be a lot of fun, and it's a lot of fun because there's a lot of fun things to talk about. The Memphis Grizzlies getting back into the swing of things, starting a 4-game road trip last night in Oklahoma City in a game that, obviously there was a lot of fun things going into it. The return of Dillon Brooks, but the return was a bit delayed. Let's talk about the fun occurrence that started off the game. I talked about it in the Locked On Now for the game, Damichael. It basically was the NBA's version of that Spider-Man GIF, whatever you call it. But the two Spider-Men, when they're looking at each other, that's exactly what we had going on. Damichael Cole, when you saw that going on, what went through your head when the Grizzlies and the Oklahoma City Thunder both came out in the home whites?
Shawn, just confusion. I mean, you think about, how many times have you seen that? I've never seen that before in an NBA game. Yeah, I've seen, when it comes to, in college games, I think there was, one time I saw, a team where, a light bright color, and another team wore a color that was, another bright color that was close. But outside of stuff like that, two white jerseys, and, from people who were there, they said that the crowd kind of had, a little murmur, what are they doing? And that would have been hilarious to see, but I've never seen anything like that, Shawn.
And it was the right call, right? The refs did the right thing, being able to make sure that there were, the Grizzlies went back and, tried to, put their road uniforms on. I joked with a few people that the Grizzlies were simply being hospitable, proving to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander the home whites of the Grizzlies would look a lot better on him than the home whites of the Thunder once we trade for him this offseason. Ha! We'll get to that at a later time. But all joking aside, after the confusion wore off and the Grizzlies literally changed their uniforms, the game started, and after 2 months of being away, Dillon Brooks was back on the court. And Damichael, something that, I know you've talked about, something that me and you really didn't get to talk about that much before last week, but an interesting storyline was once Dillon returned, was he going to come off the bench a bit? Like Taylor Jenkins had said they were going to look at, but he was right back in that starting lineup. We'll start there. What were your thoughts about Dillon back in the starting lineup and Ziaire coming off the bench?
It was seamless in this game. I honestly, at this point, I want to see it against better competition because that was too perfect. You couldn't have written that better in a movie in a way. That was as perfect as it gets. I mean, Dillon Brooks just comes in and he gets a couple easy baskets, knocks down the 3 ball that's pure net. And then Ziaire Williams comes off the bench and scores 11 points, knocks down 3 triples. And it's these guys have been practicing this for weeks or something. But that was just my takeaway. It's now, we saw this against the youngest team in the NBA, a team that they beat by, an NBA record. It's 73 points, I think it was. Now I want to see it against someone better because that was almost too seamless. Steven Adams talked about, there are certain things they have to catch Dillon Brooks up in terms of the speed and things like that. And Dillon Brooks actually talked about, the growth in his teammates that he's noticed and things like that. So I'm sure, those little kinks have to iron themselves out. But overall, it was pretty crazy to me to see how Dillon and Shawn, I know you noticed this as well. For the 4 starters who everyone was worried about in terms of shot distribution, everyone was saying Morant how's he going to get his shots? Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson, Dillon Brooks
looking at it right now. Shot. Yep.
And you saw it, Shawn. You look at the shot distribution. It's 14, Bane 15, Jackson 13, Brooks 14. You couldn't have drawn it up any better.
Absolutely. This is why I'm excited for the co-host gig, because that's exactly the point that I was going to bring up. And the other thing that stands out about it is that with Dillon back, the other thing that stood out, I talked about it a bit earlier on Twitter today. One of the things that stood out about Dillon's offensive game, Damichael, in the short spurts that he's played this year, is an improvement when it comes to playmaking for his teammates, but also decision making. A career high assist percentage, a career low turnover percentage, which indicates certainly better decision making. 4 assists to 1 turnover tonight. As you mentioned, the shot distribution was there, but overall, Ja Morant did not score a single point in the first quarter. I'm going to admit something here. I had a draft ready to go on Twitter for when Ja scored 3 points to talk about how he became the latest Grizzly to score 1,500 points in a season. I had to cancel that draft of what the tweet I was going to send because there was no points in the first quarter. But still, 38 points by the team. I believe 13 assists in the first quarter. The great thing about Dillon coming back, you didn't have to have the 25 or 30 from Ja, Damichael, for this Grizzlies offense to show how high-powered it can be. Another great start in which Ja and everybody else was contributing with good ball movement. It was a complete team effort, which was great to see.
Yeah, and you talk about Ja Morant. I don't remember the exact numbers, Shawn, but he had the second longest streak in the NBA of 20 points or more in games. And he comes out first game with Dillon Brooks back, only scores 17. But if you go back, I mean, even in the brief time that I was around, but, I've watched, the Grizzlies for a while, but in the brief time that I was around in terms of watching them with Dillon Brooks and Ja Morant in the lineup, Ja Morant was a more natural point guard in a way. Now, all point guards pretty much in today's game are scoring guards, but he had more of that, I'm going to get my teammates involved first, and then I'll get mine. And he would say that in pressers. He would basically say, I'm just going to, make sure he gets his teammates involved, takes his shots when he gets them, takes what the defense gives him, etc. In this game, it wasn't the fact that he didn't even score in the first quarter. I think he only took 1 or 2 shots. So he wasn't coming out, just flying towards the rim, like we've seen in games before. It was Desmond Bane's is going to get his. Dillon Brooks is going to get his. Jaren Jackson came out, knocked down a couple triples. And it's like, okay, then I'll get mine, in the flow of the offense than going out being this super aggressive guy trying to get it. And that was interesting to see, Shawn.
Absolutely. And, we look at it, and the balance was just there. You talk about the perfect balance that was there between Ja, Desmond, Jaren, and Dillon. Also looking at it, Jaren Jackson Jr., 5 of 13 from the field, but 2 of 4 from 3. Desmond Bane, 3 of 5 from 3. Dillon himself, 42% from the field. Ja was 50%. But here's the big key. Overall in this game, 30 assists, a great first quarter start, 7 players in double figures, 70 points in the paint, 19 offensive rebounds. There were so many different wells for the Grizzlies to choose from, and that's what really stands out. When we talk about offensive balance, we want for it to be scoring in the paint plus highly efficient from 3. That's the typical way that you see teams have offensive balance in the NBA. But Damichael, it's a bit different when it comes to the Grizzlies. It's the resourcefulness of what they can do in the paint. Scoring on the first shot, getting to the free throw line, the second chance opportunities. But when they could do all those things plus throw in double-digit threes, that's a pure sign that this offense is doing what it needs to do to be able to win games, especially when it comes to potential playoff matchups.
When they shoot the ball, it's curtains most nights because the paint scoring, even when, it's no secret. Every team in the NBA knows Ja is going to drive the ball. They know Brandon Clark is going to try to get in the paint and use his little push shot and floater. They know Jaren Jackson will take you off the dribble and, go to his spin over the left or right shoulder and go to his hook shot with either hand. These things by this point of the season. At this point, it's just the Grizzlies are just that good at paint scoring. So when you combine that with the three-point shooting and like you mentioned, Desmond Bane, 3 triples, Jaren Jackson made a couple, and then Dillon Brooks makes 1. It's tough. And then Tyus Jones. The bench guys. I wrote about them today too because the bench guys. The bench is something serious. Tyus Jones a couple threes, and I think Tyus Jones is, for me, like just from a mind perspective, he's probably one of my favorite Grizzlies to watch because he has games where he's super aggressive and he's this spot up shooter, and then he has games where he's just dishing it around. And I'm trying to what goes into his mindset in terms of when to do these things. But I mean, today he was a scorer, and they needed him to be that. It's kind of been picture perfect in terms he chooses when to be this distributor, when to be this scorer. And you look at the stats, Melton didn't have it tonight, and Tyus is like, cool, I'm going to leave the bench and score it in.
And that's exactly correct. And with the return of Dillon Brooks, you now see the bench get even deeper with Ziaire Williams, who himself had a very good and efficient game. We'll discuss that in just a moment. But listen, Damichael, with Dillon Brooks being back, we're going to talk about it. I think the Grizzlies can comfortably go 10 deep, even in the playoffs. And that means there's so many options to choose from. It reminds me of Built Bar, Damichael. And now not only having 18 different flavors to choose from, but you also have Built Puffs, Built.com Puffs. They're amazing. The great thing about Built Bar is we talk about resourcefulness, over 18 different flavors to choose from. You now have the great tasting puffs, which you can have in the morning for breakfast or in the afternoon as a snack. But if you go to Built.com right now, you can put in the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your next order from Built Bar. Once you make it a part of your day, it's going to be there to stay. Go to Built.com. Get you some bars, get you the puffs. Again, have it in the morning, have it in the afternoon, but put in that promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your next order from Built Bar. Listen, we can't thank you enough for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day. But there's a lot of exciting stuff going on in the world of sports. MLB free agency, NFL free agency. Check out the Locked On MLB or Locked On NFL podcast of your favorite team in those respective sports as your second and third listen of the day after checking out Locked On Grizzlies. So, Damichael, we talk about Dillon Brooks coming back. He's back in the starting lineup. Obviously, at the end of the day, the success, the chemistry, and the overall production of Ja, Desmond Bane, Dillon, and Jaren Jackson Jr., especially Ja and Bane on offense, Jaren and Dillon on defense, that's what's going to sign the deal of how successful the Grizzlies season is. But Damichael, as I mentioned, 7 scores in double digits last night, including 3 off the bench: Ziaire, Tyus, and Brandon Clark. Damichael, you've got a lineup of Tyus, Melton, Ziaire, Kyle Anderson, and Brandon Clark as a second unit coming in. Just how excited does that make you? That's thrilling coming off the bench.
Shawn, it's something serious, man. I was watching it today, and Taylor Jenkins really has some decisions to make, man. I mean, even we saw, at the beginning, I think at the second quarter it was when he went fully with the 5-man bench. But the bench outside of that little stretch, they were like distributed out with the starters. So you'd have Melton come in, I think, with like Bane, and then you'd have Dillon Brooks running with Tyus, and I mean, however they did it. But basically, they're even more versatile now. And John Conchar in this situation, he's the odd man out. And John Conchar has done some really good things. I think he was actually very big in that Knicks game with the way he drove the basketball. But with that being said, what Ziaire Williams has been done, I mean, Shawn, you mentioned the shooting since February and how he's really turned it around, because most people will look at his raw numbers, and that's the first thing they're going to do. They're going to look at his numbers and say, oh, he's shooting, 30% from 3? This is the guy we're supposed to be scared of? And then you'll look at Shawn's stats and say, look, this man's shooting 45% from three-point range since the beginning of February. And that's the shooter that we've seen. It's the confidence. If Ziaire Williams is playing like that, because to me, Tyus Jones is a given most nights. I wouldn't call Anthony Melton's production, as we saw tonight. Some days he's going to shoot well, some days, but his defense is a given. But Tyus Jones, Brandon Clark, and even Kyle Anderson, I think those 3 are pretty much every night you know exactly what you're going to get. And some night they give you even more. Anthony Melton, the defense is going to be there every night. But some nights he's going to shoot the ball and score 18 points, and some nights he's going to have 2 points. So what Ziaire Williams did, I mean, that gives this bench legitimately 5 guys who can score 10 points any given night. And that's a lot of benches don't have that, just to put it simple. A lot of benches just don't have that, Shawn.
And that's what stands out. Two things that really stand out. Last year we had DeAnthony Melton shooting as good as he did. We also had Grayson Allen doing it as well. But I call them shooting surges. That last part of the first quarter, first part of the second quarter, where the bench is on the floor, the Grizzlies setting the tone early with their bench by having one of their bench guys being able to hit multiple threes. Well, now with Tyus shooting a career best, DeAnthony Melton, who can at any point in time get hot to a difference-making level, and Ziaire Williams shooting like he has now. As you mentioned it, if DeAnthony Melton doesn't have it one night, then Ziaire or Tyus could have it. And that is certainly a very, very positive development to see. Plus, you've got Bane and Dillon who can get going, Jaren as well. The Grizzlies have options. They may not be as certain as you might like to support Josh shooting from distance, but they're so deep in the options that could get those streaky shots going. It's likely that at least one of them will get going, and it's great to have three of those options off the bench at any one point.
Yeah, I mean, great point. Great point, because at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. It's a numbers game, and the more, the merrier. The more options you have. I thought John Conchar, he shot in the ball real well this season, but the difference you get in Conchar and Ziaire is Ziaire runs the floor a little bit better. We've seen him catch a lot of the alley-oops, and the way Ziaire gets out in transition, and you'll notice he sprints, and a lot of times he's one of the first players up the court. That he knows exactly where to go, and usually, with Jock coming downhill, Tyus, DeAnthony Melton, he's going to be opening those corners a lot because of the way he runs the floor. I think we think of John Conchar more as like, he's going to get his offensive rebounds. He's going to get some open shots that are more created by the dribble penetration and things like that. I think Ziaire can get his more in the flow of things going on in the game, like in transition, because of what he does. And I think that's a big boost. And, we talked about Zaire's potential defensively. I think Dillon Brooks, who, very honest guy, basically said that, with Ziaire, moving his feet is something, they have to really get. And we've noticed that, Tyrese Maxey against, the Sixers, when Maxey had that really big game, Shawn, he just couldn't stay in front of Maxey, because he was so quick. So it's the little things, but you have to nitpick almost, because you can kind of rebuttal to that thing and say, oh, well, we can just put DeAnthony Melton on that guy. Or you can say, oh, we can just put Kyle Anderson, which we've seen. They've put Kyle Anderson on guards. Sometimes I've noticed lately, just in the last couple games, I saw like RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, like he was guarding all of these guys, and he guarded CJ McCollum some. I mean, they really trust as well. And I think when we talk about the bench, one thing that I noticed, Shawn, we talk about the hustle stats, right, with this team. It's all throughout the entire team. But the steals, the blocks, I mean, Jaren Jackson, of course, he gets a lot of credit for the blocks. But a lot of that havoc that Taylor Jenkins once created is created by Kyle Anderson, DeAnthony Melton, Brandon Clark, and Tyus Jones. I think those guys create a little bit more havoc than Desmond Bane, and, Steven Adams does his work as well. But those are the top guys, I think, when you talk about who messes up an offense the most. It's DeAnthony Melton, it's Brandon Clark, and it's, and then you can kind of throw Ziaire with his long arms in that conversation. I mean, he fits perfect with that group.
And to your point, it just naturally happens. Listen, your less skilled players in terms of being in the NBA, they're going to come off the bench. There's less structure. There's less standard as far as those second units. So you're going to likely see more transition opportunities when it comes to the bench units. I don't know of a bench out there that matches the Grizzlies in terms of both creating those transition opportunities with the activity of being able to steal the ball like a DeAnthony Melton and a Kyle Anderson, the blocking ability of Brandon Clark. You've got the finishing ability of Brandon and Ziaire Williams. I don't know of a bench out there that's going to sit there and match this team when it comes to transition skills, but also the non-scoring value, the defense that you can get with Kyle Anderson and Brandon Clark and DeAnthony Melton, the shooting as well. The other thing that stands out about this bench, Damichael, there is so much value outside of just being sources of scoring that make this bench very versatile, and it allows for Taylor Jenkins to mix up both starters and bench pieces depending on what game, where we are in the game, and what lineups may, be the result of how the game's flowing. There's a lot of different options and mismatches Taylor Jenkins can create.
Yeah, 100%, and that's the beauty of it. And just Tyus Jones, he's multifaceted. He can score, he can distribute. DeAnthony Melton has really, I've seen him pushing the pace a lot more lately. And, Ziaire Williams is growing in his confidence. Kyle Anderson has been noted as one of those versatile guys since UCLA. And that's always been a part of his game. So it's a stronger bench now. And you were talking 10 deep, for the playoff run, and that's going to be an interesting decision Taylor Jenkins has to make, because a lot of those teams are going to go probably 8 or so. And I mean, you don't want to leave DeAnthony Melton, Ziaire maybe, or Kyle Anderson, those guys, because I would figure Tyus and Brandon are for sure givens if push comes to shove. Those 100% givens, but that's some interesting decisions that they'll have to make. And that's why, just monitoring the usage of these rotations down the stretch will be pretty interesting, because it's going to be telling.
It certainly is. And one of the things that I will be glad to tell you about is the fact that when it comes to the Grizzlies themselves, we talk about the fact that the bench for the Grizzlies supports the starters in many of the same ways the starters find advantages. The Grizzlies bench does as well. One thing that we're going to talk about is just how consistent this Grizzlies team is at getting these second chance opportunities. It's not only Steven Adams, the ripple effect of his impact certainly is shown. But before we do that, Damichael, I'll tell you this. When it comes to the odds with the Grizzlies, I would say that the Grizzlies are one of the best bets in the NBA when it comes to choosing the over, when it comes to points, and when it comes to them being able to certainly cover when it comes to betting. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. I mean, yeah, it's the team earlier this season, they were one of the best money bets because people just did not expect this run to happen. And even now, I mean, you look at this most recent surge that they've been on, a lot of big blowout wins, a lot of money to be made out there, Shawn.
Absolutely. And the best place to make it is at betonline.net. When it comes to the odds, when it comes to the NBA, March Madness is here. The Tennessee Vols are SEC champions, number 3 seed in the South region. We won't sit here and get too much into that. And congratulations to the Memphis Tigers as well for making the tournament a 9th seed as well. Hopefully they'll get that upset on Gonzaga. But if you like to bet on pro basketball, college basketball, obviously you've got UFC, boxing, baseball's back, so many different things. BetOnline.net is the best place for you to go with the best odds out there. Vegas casino games, a great interface on your mobile device or on your laptop. Check out BetOnline.net today. Listen, we can't thank you enough for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day. But just like we talked about baseball, we talked about football, check out Locked On Fantasy NBA. I know you're probably in the playoffs right now. Josh Lloyd hosts the number 1 fantasy basketball podcast out there. Check out Locked On Fantasy NBA. I've not had the pleasure of playing Damichael in a fantasy basketball league, but that's actually to his benefit, because he wouldn't stand a chance. But all joking aside, speaking of folks not standing a chance, boxing out Steven Adams, Damichael Cole, has to be one of the biggest challenges in the NBA. I want to throw a couple of things out there to you that is absolutely amazing. So the Grizzlies right now, since the 2014-2015 season, they have played 69 games. They've got 13 more games. The Grizzlies are on pace, Damichael, to have the most second chance points by an NBA team, possibly over a full season, possibly that we've seen over the past 10 or 20 years. And the big reason why is Steven Adams. So Steven Adams has been in the league now for 9 seasons. In 6 of the 9 seasons that Steven Adams has been in the league, the team that he has played for has finished first or second in total second chance points in the NBA. I get it that offensive rebounding may not be considered one of the most valuable aspects of the game or one of the most valuable skill sets, but Damichael, it becomes highly impactful when you truly have a player in Steven Adams who is arguably the best in the NBA right now, and is that consistent of a difference maker when it comes to the offensive boards?
Yeah, it's Shawn. Just go get Steven Adams in free agency, and your team, all the rebounding issues will be fixed. I mean, and with this team in particular, the Grizzlies were a good rebounding team last season. It's you added him on to what they already have. And I mean, I like, what Brandon Clark brings and Kyle Anderson, even the guard rebounders and Melton and Ja Morant. But Steven Adams, the Grizzlies, they aren't, some glamorous offense that gets, half court offense would probably be one of their weaknesses, right up there with shooting. His fit is so perfect with this team because, with the Thunder, you could say, oh, you had Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook for a lot of those years. So, especially in Kevin Durant, efficient shooter. Like, those rebounds were nice, but weren't needed, I don't think. As with this team, they're going to miss some shots from time to time. And he comes down with those boards, and when he kicks it out, the defense isn't completely reset, and now you have Ja coming downhill at a defense that's scrambling. You're going to get an open shot, or you're going to get Ja, making some highlight that we're going to see on SportsCenter every single time. I mean, Steven Adams is a super big part of this team's success. I don't think by any accident this team has went from, a number 8 seed to becoming, a 2 seed. And with pretty much virtually the same players in the starting lineup and just adding Steven Adams.
So the other thing that stands out to Michael is that this isn't just something that came into play. Yes, this is the best offensive rebounding season of Steven Adams' career, but I'm ready to make the claim. I'm ready to make the argument. Steven Adams truly is one of the best offensive rebounders in NBA history. And we're not talking about after 1 or 2 seasons. We're talking about the fact that over nearly a decade, he's proven this. The other night, he eclipsed 17,500 minutes in his career. A good season for an NBA starter is somewhere between 22 and 2,500 minutes typically, right? But among NBA players in NBA history who have played at least 17,500 minutes in their career, Steven Adams has the 5th best offensive rebounding percentage of any NBA player who's eclipsed that amount. So you're talking about a huge sample size. You're talking about validity in terms of him being one of the best offensive rebounders. And I'm going to be honest with you, Damichael. People talk about him being the strongest guy in the NBA, which I clearly think it is. If you pick up a Tony Bradley-sized guy and carry him across half court, that's your proof there. But it also comes down to IQ. I think that one thing, and we've seen it with the evolvement or the evolution of his passing, one thing that stands out and contributes to how dominant Steven Adams is on the offensive boards, it's his IQ. This is a very smart man, a very insightful player. We see it when we get to talk to him in the post-game comments, but that has a big reason. Plays a big part in his game.
100%. I mean, you talked about the post-game comments and just watching him, dissect where he thinks the Grizzlies need to improve over this this next stretch. And like I said, he was, we got to get Dillon Brooks caught up to speed in little certain areas that he pointed out. And you peep his mind for the game. And when I first got here, and I sat courtside at the games, one of the first things that I noticed was Steven Adams is so engaged even when he's not in the game. I remember, I think it was like the first game I went to, he gets up off the bench and he's right beside Taylor Jenkins, barking at the players there on the other side of the free throw line. And he's barking directions at them. And when they come back to the bench, he's, teaching the big men something. Or his presence, is a present for this team. It's really been a gift.
And the other reason why it's been a gift to Michael is because we saw him, and I know you weren't here at the time, but one of the things that really stood out was before the season, we saw him working with Brandon Clark. And you've seen the ripple effect of Steven Adams' ability on the offensive boards, the tutelage. Listen, Brandon Clark arguably is the best offensive rebounding reserve in the league. Metrics will back that up if you look at them, especially when it comes to converting offensive rebounds to second chance points. I think only Mitchell Robinson is better at that this year than Brandon Clark. But the other reason why I mention that is because of where it plays into the scheme of things when it comes to the playoffs. Listen, you never want to get in the playoffs and start the battle of trading twos for threes. You never want to do that. But the Grizzlies just right now, in terms of their consistency as a three-point shooting team, they're going to be one of the worst ones in the playoffs. It's just numbers show it. How do you combat that? It's by getting that possession edge. 5, 7, 10, 12 more shots per game than their opponents. If they can do that consistently, and even if it is trading twos for threes, they can get 5 or so more field goals made per game than their opponent in a playoff series and back it up with the top 10 defense. That's how they can overcome not being able to shoot the three, and why it's important for Steven Adams to be on the court. His effectiveness may not be as good in the playoffs as it is now, but our offensive rebounding ability will show up as a key aspect in a playoff game at some point in time, I feel, in the near future.
Yeah, 100%, Shawn. It's been done before. It's been done before, and I actually wrote about that recently too, just in terms of teams who have had comparable numbers in terms of shooting and won titles, won the West. And the only franchise in the 21st century that's done it is the Lakers. But the Lakers did it in 2019, when they had Anthony Davis and LeBron James, Alex Caruso, Danny Green, and that bunch. But they also did it, I believe it was 3 other seasons during the Shaq and Kobe era. Now, some of the, the shooting numbers were skewed because of Shaq's free throw shooting. But then again, the 3-point shooting wasn't as good too. But in the same way, you saw they were dominant in paint scoring, and they had really elite defensive play. So it's a pattern. If you don't shoot the ball as well, to offset that, you have to be a great offensive rebounding team in general, and you have to be able to play some really good defense. And we've seen them do both so far.
And at the end of the day, I know that it may not be the most ideal way of doing things, and I'm not trying to get into the grit and grind conversation where we're zigging while the rest of the NBA is zagging. That's not it at all, because of the potential that we have shooting the basketball. But one other thing that stands out, Damichael, is that I get it. Teams that can shoot the three and defend the three, those typically are the things that can help you advance. But one thing that you can't keep from this Grizzlies team, one thing that you have to absolutely embrace is this team being the best version of itself. Just like if you want John Morant to pull up and shoot more, that's fine, but he's not being the best version of himself. Even if the best version of this current Grizzlies roster may not be on the level or may not be the typical way teams advance in the playoffs, them being the best version of themselves is what gives them the best chance to advance. And with this team's potential when it comes to shooting as well, there may not be a ceiling that's out there. So I certainly think the level at which they're getting their second chance points, it's going to present them with some opportunities in the playoffs that people may not think may be there right now.
Yeah, 100%. It's all going to come down to the shooting. They're going to be really good when it comes to paint scoring. How elite will they be? That's going to be a question, because teams are going to be more physical, and when Ja comes flying through the lane, he's probably going to get hit a couple more times, and not even just Ja. Desmond Bane really makes some nice physical drives too to the basket, and overall, they're probably going to get hit a couple more times, and teams are going to fight a little bit harder through those Steven Adams screens that they want no part of right now. But, they're going to fight a little bit harder to get through them in the postseason. So it's like the paint advantage is going to be there. How much of an advantage will it be? So you're probably going to need some shooting to offset that. And it's going to come down to that. I mean, we've seen, they've been like Jekyll and Hyde shooting the three-pointer lately. They'll have a really good game. They have a really good game. It's like, man, they have a really good game from three-point range. And then it's like, man, but the potential is there. I mean, we've seen it a lot of times, but there also are going to be those dud nights.
If we can have Jaren or Dillon shooting well in the starting lineup to support Bane, and then if we could have a shooting surge from a Ziaire or Melton or Tyus, if we can have at least one of those things happen in the starting lineup and the bench, that's going to be a big key for our playoff success. But before we do that, we've got plenty of other things to discuss, including on tomorrow's show, looking at the game coming up against the Indiana Pacers. Damichael Cole, it has been a pleasure talking with you, sir. And this is going to be a consistent thing, as we are now co-hosts our first show together as the new co-hosts of Locked On Grizzlies. I listened last week. You did a simply outstanding job. But hey, this has been one hell of an opening opportunity with you, and I look forward to many more to come here in the near future.
Shawn, I can't wait. I can't wait. And it's going to be fun just talking basketball, and we're going to have a fun postseason to get to eventually, too. So this is going to be a fun run.
Absolutely. Hopefully it's going to be with a few rounds of victories, and who maybe we'll even pull it off and get it to the NBA Finals. For Damichael Cole, who you can find at Damichael C on Twitter, my name is Shawn Coleman. You can find me at StatsSAC on Twitter. The show at Locked On Grizzlies, and make sure you check out all the great stuff, not only on podcasts, the podcast platforms, which are all free, but right here on YouTube as well. Keep on subscribing. You're going to keep getting great content from me and Damichael. Damichael, I hope you have a great start to the week, sir.
You too, Shawn. Appreciate you, man, always, and looking forward to the rest of this week.
Yes, sir. And for Damichael Cole, my name's Shawn Coleman. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Locked On Grizzlies podcast.